Hello and welcome. I am Tricia Davies-Muffet and I lead customer marketing for Google Workspace. And I am a white woman with dark hair wearing, as usual, a black top, a black jacket, and black pants. And I'm very excited to have you here today. We're super grateful for having you here and for the space to discuss this topic. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to my partner here, Nicole, who will take it from here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Huynh. I am a white female with blonde hair wearing a burgundy top and light brown pants. I am a senior product marketing manager here at Google in Technology Partners, but I spend a lot of my time at Google on the side doing advocacy work internally for disability and neuroinclusion. I'm the marketing and communications lead for our Disability Alliance, ERG, across all of Google. I've done a number of 20% projects, which for us is side projects for inclusion in our products. And I'm also an inclusive marketing consultant. That means I sit on a panel with other Google marketers, and we review some of our biggest campaigns to make sure that they are appropriately representative and inclusive of all populations. And a little bit about myself personally. I have something called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I'm also a neurosurgery survivor, something I went through after a really bad car accident. And on the neurodiversity side, I am dyslexic and I have obsessive compulsive disorder. And I want to normalize the conversation around disability and neurodivergence in the workplace. And I'm passionate about the intersection of disability, neuroinclusion, and technology. So before we dive in, just a quick review of what we will be going through today. We will take a quick look at disability and neurodivergence in the world today. We will then look at what that looks like in the workplace. We'll then pass to Tricia and look at what our features for Gemini for Workspace look like and how that intersection can support accessibility and inclusion for disability and neurodivergence. And then we'll have a fireside chat with one of our customers, and you'll get to hear live their experience using this product for accessibility and inclusion. And we'll leave you with some next steps before we go. And before we dive in, just a quick note, we cannot speak for everyone. We're just two individuals, but we will try our best to be representative of this important information that we're going to share with you today. So whether you're a people manager, a business leader, or you yourself are in the community or know someone in the community, we thank you for being in the room with us for this important conversation. But before we dive in, I want to share what brings me here today. I am blessed to have a radically inclusive manager. His name's Claude Robinson, and I work for one of the most inclusive companies and accessible companies in the world. I'm honored to share the stage with Tricia, who's been an incredible sponsor for this topic, but it has not always been that way. I have spent a lot of my career trying to hide my dyslexia with all kind of work hacks. I've spent a lot of time hiding doctor's appointments, trying to fit them in places where no one could detect it so people weren't afraid I would go out on leave or that I was too sick to do my job. I have tried to fit into a more physically typical norms of work or neurotypical ways of thinking so I'm not detected. And prior to Google, I've had things like the legitimacy of an invisible disability questioned. An executive actually told me that my HR-approved accommodation was a privilege and not a right, and she would take it away if she wanted to. I've been discouraged from trying to advance in my career from very well-meaning friends and mentors because they wanted me to focus on my health. And I've been pressured to come back early from medical leave after having surgery because it was putting a burden on the business. And my experiences are sadly not unique. Sharing these hidden challenges is what bonds us together as a community, and if you ever join a community group, you'll hear a lot of these stories shared. If I could talk to my younger self, I would advocate for myself better in these situations, and that's what brings me here today. I am no longer afraid of any negative outcomes of discussing disability or neuroinclusion in the workplace, because it's more important to pave the path for those who come behind us so they get to experience a more equitable and accessible workforce. So to start us off, we're going to talk a little bit about language and set some baselines for our conversation today. So throughout this presentation, you'll find that we use typically person-first language. I do want to say that these are generally accepted terms, but not everyone in the community preferred these. For instance, I don't mind saying I'm a disabled person. This is just a good practice when generally speaking to large groups of people. We also want to look at identity when it comes to disability and neuroinclusion. This is something that's often misunderstood by those observing our community. We've got this influencer, and she's done a lot of work with us. She's a blind influencer. Her name's Lachi. And she said in a recent social media post that she identifies as blind. And this was very misunderstood. People were really confused by what this actually meant. Now, I can't speak for her, but what it basically means for the community is that we get to define how we relate to our disability. So someone with the same diagnosis may identify as blind, but the next person with that exact same diagnosis may identify as low vision or having poor vision, the same way as some person with the same diagnosis may identify as being disabled, or someone with a medical condition may say, I'm not disabled, I simply have some medical issues. Identity is how we relate to our own conditions, and it's really up to us to decide, and all of it's okay, whether it's one or the other. So like Emily Ladau says, a prominent advocate is that she says, I don't want to be afraid of the word disabled, because that's what I am. To acknowledge that doesn't make me any less human. So we don't have to be afraid of the word disability, and that brings us to the topic of ableism. Ableism is a form of discrimination and social prejudice against people in the disability community. It's based on the belief that there are more superior forms of physical or neurotypical ways of thinking that are better than or more complete than those that might be disabled or neurodiverse. Now, this is not a comprehensive list right here of ways that ableism can show up, but it's a good starting point, whether it's an assumption of inferiority, focusing on fixing, or dehumanizing stereotypes. So think about it. Have you ever seen someone in a wheelchair and crossing the street and thought, oh, I should go push them. I should go help. This is actually ableism, and it's a focus on fixing. It's likely that person does not need your help, and they're perfectly capable of getting across the street by themselves. If you want to ask, can I help? It's always okay to ask, but we never want to assume that we need to help someone, as just one example. And it's important that we constantly evaluate our attitudes and thoughts to evaluate ourselves for ableism, because it's something that we're all possible of thinking. So I want you to pause real quick and think to yourself. Ask yourself a few questions. Have you ever seen someone parked in a parking space with a handicap placard and thought to yourself that they were borrowing it from a friend or a family member and they didn't deserve to have it? Have you ever seen a service dog on an airplane and thought, that person just wants to have their pet with them on the plane? Or have you ever seen an employee with an accommodation and thought they were faking it, exaggerating, or didn't deserve that accommodation? This is what ableism looks like in our minds, and it translates eventually into our attitudes, actions, and the way we treat people, whether we realize it or not. And it's important to note that even people within our own community can actually think these thoughts and have these attitudes. We must be willing to challenge the way we think and the way we perceive people with disabilities and who are neurodivergent in order to create a more equitable workplace. Ableism is truly everywhere, and as you can see on this list, it really exists anywhere a human can exist. And probably one of the most disheartening places ableism shows up for those of us in the community is in our families. People in our families sometimes will accuse us of exaggerating our disabilities, our neurodivergence, or belittling the things that we say we need. So we always need community, we need friends, and we need to make sure that we are being supportive of the community. And another quick note on language before we move on. Ableism also shows up in language and in places we might not expect. So for instance, we say insensitive, not tone deaf, and we say ignore or disregard, not turn a blind eye. So if we pause sometimes and remain curious about our thoughts, we may find ableism even in ways that we didn't think about or intend. Now, before we dive into all the exciting use cases that Tricia is going to share with you today, I want to talk a little bit about how it shows up in the workplace. And you've already heard my story, and unfortunately, my experiences are not unique. But I want to look at some concrete facts with you of what this looks like in the workforce today. So according to the World Health Organization, about 16% of the world's population is disabled. And you will see the statistic often quoted, and then you will see 15 to 20% are neurodivergent. This number is a little bit more broad because there isn't really a universally accepted definition of neurodivergent, so this is more of an estimate. So this is a big picture of the whole world. Then we look at the workforce. When it comes to the world average, about 5% of the world's working population is disabled. When it comes to the US, that number turns to about 11%. This is of the working age population, so this limit stops at 65. If you increase it in the US beyond 65, that number you will see actually goes up to 22%. But for comparison, we're talking about those 65 and under who are eligible members of the workforce. And this may look like we've come a long way and that we're ahead of the curve, right? Well, that's where this conversation becomes really difficult. because 75% of those in the US who are unemployed consider themselves disabled. That's 3 in 4 people. And to be very specific about what unemployed means, it excludes people who are on Social Security disability because those people are not eligible to be in the workforce. This is truly people who are able to be employed. And this speaks very loudly about the issue we have about access and the ability to enter the workforce for people with disabilities. And this also tells you that while you may not know because people aren't always comfortable with disclosure, you will have coworkers with disabilities and you will have coworkers who are neurodivergent. And again, you're not likely to realize that. So let's take a deeper look at what this can look like and what barriers people with disabilities face in the workforce. Like I said before, my story is not unique. Discrimination can be overt or implicit. Overt discrimination can look like a protected disability and accommodation coming up in a performance review. It can look like being penalized or fired for a health condition or for taking medical leave. Or we can look at implicit biases, which can look like ableism humor, non-verbalized discriminatory thoughts that we've already talked about, ableist language, or a manager just routinely making it difficult for an employee to access an HR-approved accommodation. And so then looking further into that burden that we carry, we must bear, those of us in the community must bear this extra burden in the workforce and managing what it means to be existing with a disability. If you have a second after the presentation, I encourage you to look up the spoon theory. Spoons is like a language that we use. It talks about units of energy. We not only have the burden of managing our disability or our neurodivergence, but we have usually less energy because of that. And the spoon theory on a blog, butyoudon'tlooksick.com, is a great place to start if you're looking for an empathetic understanding of what energy management looks like, especially when it comes to workplace. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Tricia. Disability accessibility accommodations are often one-to-one, right? So you have an individual that has a certain need and that's accommodated. And then companies will often try to make sure that there are things that are scaled. So if you think about your meditation apps or at-home physical therapy, access to everyone, right? These are great because they don't require disclosure. And so we want to talk to you a little bit about today about how Gemini for Workspace can help with that intersection, create access for all, and support disability accessibility in the workplace. Tricia?
Thank you. All right, so I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you about how Workspace in general, even without Gemini, even before Gemini, and then also Gemini can be helpful to those in the disability community. And just a little bit about what brings me to this topic, in addition to being a leader for marketing and Workspace. I come from a family of neurodivergents, and I actually didn't even realize that for a long time. It was only my youngest child, my kids are now 16, 18, and 25, and my youngest child had very profound ADHD and executive dysfunction that actually made it very difficult to access school when this child was young. And through that journey that I've gone through with therapy and understanding and neuropsych evaluations and things like that, I, of course, came to realize that I also had grown up with neurodivergence, and that my husband had grown up with neurodivergence, and that my 2 older kids had actually managed to mask their neurodivergence in school. And so turns out we all really had neurodivergence. It's just that it was sort of more obvious and profound in my youngest child. And so this has made me very passionate about trying to understand how to help make, how use technology to help make work and school and interactions with other humans more accessible. So it is, I just want to make sure we are, okay. All right, it's very exciting to talk about this, and this is really about creating a more accessible and equitable work environment. But that is hard to do without having an honest conversation. We need to understand that there is ableism in the workforce, and that many in the community just sort of quietly fight to stay gainfully employed. And also their caregivers, when Nicole was discussing that sort of trying to hide being absent because of things that absolutely had to get done, doctor's appointments, sort of being out of energy at that moment. Those are also things that extend to the caregivers of those in the disability community as well. And so, just because there are legal protections in certain countries for people with disabilities, which includes people with neurodivergence, that does not protect us from unspoken biases or discrimination that cannot be proven. So this is a conversation about how technology can help, but it's also about educating, about awareness, and about shifting our perception of how we can access accessibility, or how we can view accessibility and inclusion. So only once we do all of those things can technology actually be helpful and do its work. So we're not suggesting that technology is a silver bullet here, but it is an additional tool that can make things a little bit easier. So AI can really be helpful when it is accompanied by allyship and by a radical change in the way we see people show up and how they process information in the workspace, in the workplace, and in workspace. So similar to other scaled tools, AI can be a supportive tool in your accessibility and inclusion toolbox, but let's be really clear. I don't want you to walk away from this thinking that Gemini can fix all accessibility challenges or inclusion issues in your workplace. So it does require all of those other things, the culture and sort of acceptance. So an example of this, regardless of the tools you use, is brainstorming. So when we are working on brainstorming, I've been in a situation where I've had folks on my team. I am a person who likes to brainstorm in the moment, but I had folks in my team who actually had to call me on my ableism in that experience and say, this is not something that I can do in the moment. I need preparation. So it's great that we're going to have this conversation all together, but I need the time to process that information beforehand. I need to be able to think about that in advance, and I'm asking if you can please give me advance warning of what is going to happen so that I can be ready for that conversation in the moment. So things like that, where then you can be prepared, and if you know and you are able to normalize that, then it doesn't seem like an accommodation for anyone. It's actually probably something that others needed as well. And then you can put that out in advance. But it's also that Gemini can help you with that brainstorming process. So when you know that, you can also start to work with Gemini and put some of your thoughts into Gemini and ask for those suggestions and get some of that brainstorming content in the moment when you are ready to do that brainstorming, rather than having to do it in this chaotic moment that may be overwhelming. All right, so Gemini, just to baseline on what Gemini actually is. So Gemini is the generative AI capabilities that are built into Google Workspace. So it's built into chat, it's built into creation. So when you're creating imagery, when you're creating slide decks, it's built into your writing process. So the help me write prompts that are in Gmail as well as in Google Docs. Deploying, so low-code applications, analyzing data within Sheets, and then also building with Gemini, so it extends also into coding as well. So generative AI has such potential. So in a recent McKinsey research study, we found that generative AI's impact on productivity could add trillions of dollars of value to the global economy. And research estimates that generative AI could add the equivalent of 2.6 trillion to 4.4 trillion annually across 6.3 use cases analyzed by McKinsey. And those are just the starting point. That's just what we've thought of so far. So this really can transform the way that we work. And this is something that can really help to reduce the amount of time spent on non-value added activities. So there's an estimate that this could reduce the time spent on those activities by 60 to 70% of employees' time. And one thing that Aparna Pappu, our leader of Google Workspace, says is that this removes the emotional labor of work. And I think about that in connection with the spoons theory, right? So if you only have so much energy to bring to your job, you want to bring that energy to the things that are truly valuable that you can bring to it, not to the busy work that needs to happen, not to the administrative activities, not to the things that are, one of our customers said, soul-sucking. So we are trying to get to a place where people are able to bring their best selves and what truly makes them good at their jobs to their jobs and move the rest to the side through generative AI. Oops, sorry. Wrong click there. So from the beginning, Google Workspace has really helped build in AI, and Gemini is becoming a powerful collaboration tool. So as I mentioned, with all of the different apps that you can use it in, it is across the Workspace suite, and you can find it right now in points across the suite, but very soon it will be available in a side panel where you can really use natural language to interact with all of the data that you have available across your Drive, across your Gmail, across your Docs, so that you can then organize that data, connect it, and create workflows that are much lighter lift for you as an employee. So one of the things that we love is seeing how you can really create breakthrough ideas with Gemini using it as your thought partner. So conversational exploration for deeper understanding. You can chat with Gemini. There's now a standalone Gemini experience within the Workspace environment where you can ask any question that you want. And you can brainstorm here. You can refine your thinking. You can ask for it to give you sort of what are the holes in this line of thinking that I've created, help me to understand the next step I should take. It can also give you the knowledge that you need to fuel decision making. And you can do that wherever and whenever you need to. So it's like having a thought partner with you at all times whenever you're ready to do that work, which I do think is one of the ways that this is really helpful, because you can work when and where and how it is useful for you. Easy workflow integration, so you can bring in insights and creations that are generated with Gemini right into the Workspace apps. So once you find something that you like that you've created there, you can pull it right into Docs or wherever you're working. And you do have enterprise-grade data protection, so you don't have to worry about whether all of this information is going back out to train the models. This is all of your information, all of those prompts, everything you generate, all of your information is kept private and secure for you. And it is operating on one of our most powerful AI models, so it's on 1.0 Ultra. So with simple prompts, Gemini can help you to create reports, to modify your tone. This applies to communication with customers, but also the back-end work that happens in Google Docs to prepare for discussions and meetings. So with these prompts, you can actually get in and it can help you to get ready to have a great meeting, to close a deal. It can help you to have your talking points ready so that you are more prepared when you're going into a conversation. And this can really help with brain fog. It can help with mental or physical fatigue. It can also help being a partner as you go so that you are able to rely on it when and where you need it. So with Help Me Write, everyone can use Gemini to help them write really professional prose. And this can help with all kinds of materials. So no matter what your job is, everybody has to communicate in human language. And so that's important there. So Help Me Write will help you to free up time to focus on relationship management instead of creating documentation. Again, this can help with brain fog. It can also help with disordered thoughts. It can help with physical and mental fatigue. For me, something that I've seen with my kids is that blank page can really create sort of a freeze environment, even when my kids know what it is that they want to communicate. Just getting started and staring at the blank page is often daunting and can really result in a complete shutdown. So being able to even just get something on the page, even if it's not the final product that is necessary, to have something to react to is really helpful. So language barriers also can be a blocker to effective meetings. And with automated translated captions, Gemini learns what language you speak and automatically translates to other languages in real time. And this also is a big inclusion booster. And we have heard from many of our customers that this has been super helpful to bring teams who are speaking other languages more into the fold and feeling included in the work of the organization, and not having to ask for the help that they need to actually communicate. And this helps with those who are deaf or hard of hearing and anyone who may struggle to follow along.
Yeah, I wanted to say real quick with that. So while captions are typically viewed by most people as for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, they can also be very useful for someone who is not an auditory learner. There are people who do much better with written. And in meeting environments where there's a lot of talking and they don't want to be focusing on taking notes, captions can also help with types of learning.
Yeah. All right, and then real-time teleprompting in Google Meet, giving a great presentation is challenging, and it's an art form. And we now have real-time teleprompting so that if you have written your notes and you're giving a presentation, you can actually be prompted by your own notes so that you don't lose your place in the presentation, you don't become overwhelmed. It can help with folks with anxiety disorders who may really become overwhelmed and struggle to keep going if they're managing multiple documents and trying to follow along in their notes as well as following along with the presentation. And I don't know if you have any.
No, yeah. So this is actually a great tool for also dyslexia. So for me, I will lose very easily where I'm at on the page. And so what this does is provide me just what I need right when I need it, so I don't get lost. And so there's a lot of good applications here for being able to focus on the right thing at the right time and not having too much block text or information.
Yeah. Take notes for me. This is one that I think is really important. So this includes lots of kinds of inclusion, but often folks who are trying to take notes really struggle to engage closely in the meeting that's going on. Sometimes that means that someone is assigned as the note taker, and that means that they are not allowed to really participate because they have to focus on that. But also just for folks who really become overwhelmed with that, it can really be a struggle to try to be taking notes and keeping the action items as well as following along and truly engaging in the meeting. So this one, being able to take notes and not just take the notes, but actually call out the action items for you and keep that captured is really important and helps to bring greater inclusion into every meeting.
Yeah, and this is great also for anyone using other accessibility tools. So you can imagine someone using captions who is reading. They're not able to do those, both things at once, read and take notes. They may have a note taker or simply have to try to remember what happened in the meeting. So this also just provides another, again, removes that burden, that extra layer that we have to fight for, and does that task for you.
And it also keeps track of what has happened in the meeting, even if you're a late joiner to the meeting, so that you can catch up or look back at what has happened without having to interrupt the meeting to ask for clarification or to ask for the context. And so here's some of the take notes for me. So you also get this beautiful document that comes in so that it's not just the notes, but it actually also gives you snippets so that if you need to go back and try to understand the nuance of what someone was saying and what their tone was, or what that really meant, you can watch that snippet of the conversation over again so that you can try to absorb the context of that. All right, and then this was at the last Next, we announced a feature that is coming soon, which this notes document that is now coming out is actually the next step in that journey. But Attend for Me, which is really, I would say it's the fan favorite of the things that we announced at the last Next. But this is something that we've all, I think, been waiting for, because there are a lot of meetings where you need to be there to understand the information that is being delivered, but you don't really need to be there to participate in that meeting. There are certain meetings on your calendar that you really need to participate in. There are others where you just want to gather that information, or you need to make sure that a certain question is asked during that meeting, but it's not a discussion kind of a meeting. So this is a way where you can send Gemini to attend on your behalf. You can prompt it with what questions you need to have answered during that conversation, and then it will provide you with that summary and help you get caught up afterwards. So this is one, I think, as we were talking about, folks who need to shift their schedules. This is something that can help, where you don't have to ask for the meeting to be rescheduled on your behalf if you just need to get the information, and it can just be done sort of silently.
Yeah, and so if you think about like doctor's appointments, and I even had this period after my neurosurgery where I had evening headaches, evening migraines post-surgery, and I was fine to work, usually up until 2 o'clock. And instead of asking everyone to reassign all the meetings to a lower time, I could use Attend for Me, which would have been a great tool.
Yeah. All right, and then this is what it looks like when Gemini is attending on your behalf. So some important things to note, that the more data that Gemini has, the better it performs. So, meeting notes are well documented when the meeting has a significant conversation. That is useful, and the summary is much more accurate and helpful. And the same goes for the search Gemini function in Meet. If I'm in Meet and ask Gemini to search my drive for an answer, if there isn't enough data in my drive to produce the results, it won't be that helpful. But if I have a lot of data there, then it's going to be useful. So an important thing to remember, and I think about this, I think about it as an analogy to when my kid sort of got accommodations at school. When an employee asks to use AI, this is still their work. It's just helping them get started, right? And it's an accommodation that everybody can really use. And so I'm really hopeful that we can normalize this as something that is a useful helper and sort of thought partner for everyone, and is not kind of cheating, because it isn't, is it cheating to be sort of neurotypical? I think that having AI to help you is it's a tool available to us, and there's no reason why we should deny it to folks. All right, so with that, we're going to move on to our fireside chat, and we are very excited to welcome David to the stage with us.
Thank you, Mickey.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. This is the first time I've ever actually spoken about accessibility publicly, and it's an important conversation, so I'm looking forward to doing it with you today. My name is David Cohn. For those of you who can't see me, I'm wearing light blue sneakers, khaki jeans, a blue sport coat, and I have blonde hair. And right in front of me on the floor is a very good boy, black lab, service dog, wearing a red vest, and his name is Mickey. A little bit about me. I am the co-founder and CEO of a marketing and communications agency called Civic Entertainment Group. We work with global blue chips, and we do brand work across many sectors: automotive, hospitality, tech, media, entertainment. And why am I here? I am also completely deaf, and I lip read. And my situation is not hard of hearing. It's 100% silence. I can't hear anything at all. So that means no music, no telephone, no speaking to people that are not directly in front of me, speaking clearly, and so I know a lot of things. But I've been very fortunate to have been able to navigate this very well. And I've never really, in my whole life, identified as disabled. I never thought of myself that way. I of course identified as a deaf person, but I didn't think of myself as disabled until the pandemic. When the mask came out, I couldn't talk to anybody. For 2 years, I was completely cut off from society, and that was a very, very scary time. I had a dream that I had forgotten about, that was repressed, I guess. And I hadn't had this dream in maybe 45 years. I was a 5 or 6-year-old little boy that had a nightmare. And in my nightmare, as a little deaf boy, people didn't have mouths. It was just eyes, nose, ears, and no mouth. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, scared. And in March of 2020, that dream came back to me. For the very first time, I woke up, I spoke to my mother, of course she remembered the dream, and that was a new experience for me, and that's when I started to feel like different type of way, because I was not able to navigate in the same way. Speaking of which, I would make T-shirts. I ordered T-shirts on Amazon. I made T-shirts that said, "I'm deaf, I'm liberated," for when I went out. And on the back it said, "Please be kind," because not only did I not know what people were saying to me, I didn't even know if they were addressing me. So then there is work. And work, of course, changed dramatically. First, all meetings went virtual. And for me, virtual conversations can only take place with captions. And in 2020, the virtual platforms did not have captions. Google happened to have the only one that had captions in the meet. But at that time, the captions were terrible. I mean, just very jumbled. It didn't catch anything, and I thought, I am in trouble. But what I saw in real time is that the learning algorithm was incredible. And I saw the captions become so good that I rely on it exclusively. I don't even like going to live meetings anymore. I don't think anybody does, but I don't like going to live meetings anymore. And I prefer virtual conversations because the captions are so good. I also would start every meeting explaining why we were on Gmeet and not Zoom, because a lot of people were more familiar with some of the other ones, so they would have to take an extra minute to get on. And I would talk about how amazing the Google captions are, and that actually got back to these guys, and that's how we met.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Great. So why do you think that accessibility and inclusion is so important for us to think about in the workplace?
Well, first of all, it's just it's the sheer number of people that have disabilities. If a billion people on the planet have disabilities, and I'm sure that's a low number, then you have to assume 20% of your workforce has people that have these challenges. And so it's a business leader's responsibility to help optimize their workforce. And so a lot of these people are working a lot harder, but they are, the playing field is not level. And so it's important to level that playing field for your business. Also, and I know that it was mentioned earlier, another important thing to notice is that a lot of disabilities are invisible. And you don't even know that your employees may have these issues. My situation is that way. You would not know by looking at me that I have the challenges that I have. Also, some people, and I hope less so now, but when I was coming into my career, would hide their disability. And I did it, not because I was embarrassed, and not because you wouldn't know that I was deaf. Of course you knew that I was deaf. But I started my own agency over 20 years ago, 25 years ago almost now. And when I would be in meetings, being briefed by clients, and I can't take notes, because I can't look up and down. And so I didn't want it to look like I was not performing and paying attention. Also, my clients never would have hired me if they knew how much I wasn't getting. So I was faking it and hiding it a little bit. And the tools that you all have now are so helpful. Note-taking, for example, my notes, my fake notes, at the end of the meeting would just be a big blue dot in the middle of the page because it was right on top. I wasn't looking up and down. It was writing over and over and over in the same spot, so it was completely useless. So the Google Docs also was a great tool, even before Gemini, if somebody else could just type in a meeting, and that was also relatively new for me. Did not have that in school or in the early days of my career.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So do you have a favorite Gemini for Workspace or Workspace feature you want to share with us today?
For me, it's captions, captions, captions. That's the most important thing for me. I don't know what's going on outside of what I'm looking at. And so, and these monitors that you see here don't follow me around every day. I wish they would, but they don't. So for me, it's all about caption. Okay.
Okay. What do you wish that every business leader understood about disability, accessibility, inclusion, and technology?
For me, and that's it's a very personal question. And I think the first thing for me, I think, is the human side of it. I think that's very important. And I know that disabled people have a lot of things that they think about, but for me, a feeling that follows me around every day. I have two emotions. From morning till the time I go to sleep at night. And the first one is frustration. I am constantly frustrated. I'm frustrated with all the information that I don't know that I'm not getting. And I'm frustrated with the information that I know that I'm not getting from seeing what's going on around me. And the other one, emotion, is, and I've never actually said this out loud in this type of format, but it's jealousy. I'm jealous all day long. I'm jealous watching everybody enjoy their experiences with the earbuds in, talking on the telephone, listening to music, chatting in group environments. So I think that humanity belongs in the workplace. So that's number one. And number two, and this one is a little bit more uplifting. Number two is business leaders should recognize that so much of the technology that can be used for accessible tools already exists. So when you look at the captioning, for my dream situation is that this captioning technology could just be piped into a cool pair of aviators, and I could just go about my life, and I'm getting all my experiences captioned. So that would be amazing. And it makes me think of a business analogy from that I learned this when I first started the agency. It was one of my first big meetings, and I went to Procter & Gamble in Ohio, and I was pitching them. And one of the things that they mentioned in the meeting was that, and something the P&G and some of these consumer packaging giants do very, very well, is they look for existing technologies and product lines that they can combine to create other ones and new ones. So an example of that would be the non-woven fabrics that P&G uses for brands like Tampax and Pampers diapers. They put it on the end of a stick, and the Swiffer mop was born. And they created an entirely new multi-billion-dollar category. So it's not apples to apples, but I think the sentiment is there if we think about the technologies that already exist. And for me, that really underscores the message that the accessibility conversation does not belong in HR where it is now. It belongs in the C-suite.
Technology is just a tool to hide disabilities and neurodivergence if it's not met with a culture of radical inclusion, allyship, and acceptance that really promotes equity. So take an inventory, educate, be part of the conversation. If you're a business leader or a manager, champion, become a champion. I'm very proud to say, like, my manager is one of the best champions I've ever had, and it's dramatically changed my experience at work. It has made my experience at Google even that much better. Deploy tools. Look what's available. Like David said, a lot of this already exists, and figure out how to make it universally accessible within your workplace. And at the end of the day, go back and even look at your onboarding processes. Don't make it difficult for people with disabilities or who are neurodivergent difficult for them to find these things. Just train everyone on how these things can be useful so that they know it's available to them and it doesn't require disclosure. Thank you so much again for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here at Next. And again, thank you for joining the conversation.